All right, so resiliency in adversity for healthcare providers. So, like he said, you already are resilient. I know that without a doubt in my mind. You may doubt that on some days, but I know it's true. This country's gone through a lot in the last couple of years. And you are here, you are functioning, you are working, you are showing up for a training like this. And hopefully this will give you a boost of energy and some confidence in your skills and your knowledge, and that you're doing the right things for yourself and for your patients. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what resilience means and some of the hazards of mental health work. We use two words, burnout and moral injury. They are not the same. They sometimes are used interchangeably, but they truly are different, and we'll talk about why. We'll talk about roles of guilt and shame, and there are many definitions, but I'm going to talk to you about how I think of these words and how I use them. And we're going to talk a little bit about post-traumatic growth and the things that can grow out of trauma that really don't happen until trauma. So there are opportunities to grow and become things that are fertilized in that. And I'd like to talk to you about the 10 keys to resiliency that my mentor wrote about in one of his books, talking to very resilient people like high-performing special operations soldiers or people who survive situations and do well in that, and what makes them capable of doing well in spite of great adversity. And some things can be natural or born into, and most of them can be used and learned. So let's go straight into it. So I'd like to introduce to you some people, mainly the one in the top left, Steve Southwick. He was one of my very beloved mentors who passed away last year. And Dr. Harpus Rodham and I worked very closely with him, and he is very near and dear to my heart. His work was in resiliency and in PTSD treatment, and I would like to think that me being here today is fruit of his work as well. He and his colleagues wrote Resilience in Mental Health, Challenges Across the Lifespan, a book I'm going to reference, and another version of the book. We're going to come back to this. So what does resilience mean? Does anybody want to just shout out an idea of what that means to you?
Це означає вміти пережити тяжкі часи, залишаючися функціональним.
Any other definitions?
Це буде як пружина, під тиском прогнутися і потім відновитися.
Those are both really great definitions.
Здатність адаптуватись і продовжувати свою діяльність.
Oops. So, yeah, like a tree that bends in the wind. It is strong, but it must be flexible, and it must be able to withstand ordinary days, but also the heavy storm as well. So what gives that the extra strength that it needs? If it is too strong and inflexible, it will break. So we need to be able to move with things. I like to think of it like having a big wall with some basketballs on top, and one is very inflated One is a little less, until you come down to the last one, which is very flat. And if I were to come up behind that wall with a big long stick and push all those balls off, some are going to bounce back better than others. So I like to think about what keeps your basketball inflated. What are the things that you can do so that when you are hit with a stressor, you can bounce back to baseline as well as you can? And I'm pretty sure, how many of you have been hit with a stressor in the last couple of years? Anybody? Yeah, there have been some big stressors here. So being able to bounce back to baseline is something that requires us to keep track of our sleep, our nutrition, our physical health, our mental health, our families, all these things, so that if we are too worn out and too deflated, we will just fall. So we really need to keep track of all these things. So, Oksana, could you just read this to the group? That's a pretty moving statement of a young mother who really has to be able to use her resources for the long term to be able to withstand not just the initial issues, but the long-term chronic things and maintain resilience. So this is why this is important. We need to be able to maintain for this longer marathon as well. And healthcare workers are at great risk. We are certainly at risk of poor sleep and anxiety, depression, alcohol abuse, and suicidal ideation. The US statistics are that there are about 600 physicians who commit suicide every year. That's a lot. And that doesn't account for nurses and social workers and therapists and everyone else. But there is a higher risk in the healthcare field. So we want to figure out ways that we can stay strong. When COVID-19 started, we developed a group at Yale called the Stress and Resilience Town Halls, where two of us therapists would meet weekly on Zoom and have a special topic of interest that anyone could join in and discuss. We asked surveys about people. We wanted to gauge how well they were doing with the stressors of COVID. And while this is about COVID, I think maybe you'll see some of these statements apply here as well. But healthcare workers said, was our sacrifice for nothing? How can we move forward as a nation after this? What do I do with all the anger? It's like trying to have a funeral when somebody's still on life support. How do we heal? Is it always going to feel like this? What do we need, or what do we do next? I want a plan to deal with this. Will it ever get back to normal? I'm ashamed that I feel more alive now, and I don't want it to go back to how it was before. Is there something wrong with me for thinking this? Have any of you had thoughts that are similar to any of these statements in the last couple of years? So there are some hazards specific to healthcare work, and particularly mental health. We can have vicarious traumatization, which means we hear the trauma from other people, sometimes every day, many times a day. There are some horrific stories. And when we sit in compassion with our patient and hear their story, we are at risk of taking on some of that trauma. Some patients will test you. They may test you very hard. They may see if you're trustworthy. They may push your limits. They may get angry. They may say things to see if you're really going to be there for them. And that gets hard. There can be psychological splitting. There can be something called coercive control, where people try to coerce you into behaviors, manipulate you. We work with people with personality disorders, like antisocial and borderline. And it can be tiring. We have a work environment which can be difficult. We have long hours. Sometimes we have to miss meals. Wartime conditions. Family strain. We have dangerous patients sometimes, angry or violent or agitated patients. We may be understaffed. Threats to our safety. And sometimes even our own personal histories and trauma resonate with our patients' traumas. And it can get to us a little bit. But kind of like when you get an injection for the flu, it gets your immune system ready to fight the big stressors. We call this stress inoculation. Little stressors can actually help us build skills and build tolerance and strength to fight off larger stressors when they come. It's called stress preconditioning. It means repeated small stressors build coping skills. They can change our perspective about things, create successes and new ways of doing things to overcome problems. And I like the saying that I think is everywhere. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Says every grandma ever. That happens to be my mom and my daughter. Let's talk a little bit about burnout. And we're going to talk about why it's different than moral injury. We've talked about moral injury quite a bit so far. But there's a term burnout that I think a lot of people say and use. But I think of burnout as the machinery wearing down versus the injury of the idea or concept or betrayal. So it's the machinery of the internal and external environments, kind of what we have inside of us, but also where we work, the way the hospital runs, the way the traffic is, things like that. It can lead to emotional numbing, anger and resentment toward the system, anger and resentment toward colleagues, patients, even your family. We have family says, oh, you should be with us on Sunday, not here in some conference. These kind of mechanistic things are like lack of sleep or food, lack of time to relax. Sometimes we don't get feedback on what we've done. We may think we did a really good job helping a patient, but then we don't know. We send them on to the next place and we never hear if it worked or not. That's very dissatisfying. We need to hear about when our work is good. Electronic medical records can be very time-consuming. Administrative duties, paperwork, high workloads. Not having enough time to actually do what you need to do with your patients. Money, physical illnesses, family demands and distance from family. All these things are kind of the mechanisms that work around us in our environment. So these are the things that contribute to burnout. So good systems pay attention to this, and they try to find ways that help that workflow be better, to take away some of the burnout. And they help with feedback so that you feel that what you're doing is meaningful. So these are some ideas we're going to think about. Moral injury, on the other hand, is the damage done to one's conscience when one perpetrates or witnesses or fails to prevent acts that transgress one's own deeply held moral beliefs, values, or ethical codes of conduct. So this is more about what I value and what my personal ethics are, what my morality is, where that gets crossed, by others or by myself. And in healthcare, we may have life or death decision making. We may not have enough resources and we might have to ration healthcare. Only people that are more likely to survive will get a ventilator, things like that. Who gets the blood supplies? Who gets the tourniquets? And the feeling of not being able to do enough, institutional barriers, things of whose domain does stuff fall under, and wondering if you're making any difference. Again, very unsettling place to be. And guilt. We're human, we make mistakes. We need to be able to safely do that. Sometimes mistakes happen, but can we acknowledge it? Can we evaluate it? Can we learn from it and figure out systems to avoid it in the future? Or do we chastise somebody for making an error? And just feeling weak, like I can't keep up with it. And all of this can exist with or without burnout. So you can certainly have a situation in your organization that leads to moral injury, but also in the context of burnout, it's your basketball's really deflated, right? Hard to bounce back. Do these ideas make sense, these two concepts? Okay. Common consequences of moral injury. Certainly we can feel guilt and shame, anger and rage, isolation, grief, substance use can happen, sleep problems and nightmares, insomnia, suicide or suicidal ideation. So those are a lot of places we can end up if this is unchecked. So my mentor, Dr. Southwick, and I used to meet every week for an hour. And we would talk about ideas and papers we were working on, projects we were doing. And he was always wonderful to just listen to because he had great experience and advice. And he was ill with cancer, and I didn't know that he was as sick as he was. And we met for our weekly meeting, and we were talking our usual stuff. And he stopped and he said, "You know, I want to tell you one thing. If you remember nothing else from all our time together, remember isolation is the kiss of death." And I thought of his sum total of knowledge. That is what he found most important to tell me. For me, probably, but for the work I do and for passing it on to all of you, this ripple that moves outwards as you pass it on to your teams as well, that what we really need to do to save people is to keep them connected in some way or another. The connection and integration is critical to recovery, not optional, critical. Let's talk about some concepts like guilt and shame. This is a statue of Cain after he killed his brother Abel in the Bible, in Genesis. So guilt has many characteristics. Let's define this together so we're on the same, in agreement about what it is. Guilt can be real or imagined wrongdoing. It doesn't have to be actual wrongdoing to feel guilty about something. The sense of guilt and what it means changes across development from being a small child to a teenager, young adult, older adults. It involves a moral judgment, almost always. Some people feel guilt more than others. They're a little bit more sensitive to it. And guilt can involve a specific action or an inaction. And guilt sometimes motivates healing practices. I feel bad about this, therefore I'm going to repair something. And guilt can have a positive or negative outcome. Guilt can be adaptive. It's a socially normative function. If you do something that breaks the rules of society and you feel bad because society says, and you correct that action, it keeps you working within the flow of the rules of society. So that's a very normative thing. It's healthy. Non-adaptive guilt is the ruminative guilt, where you go around and around and around in your head. It's self-persecutory. I'm a terrible person for having done this. And it leads to shame. And I'm going to define guilt and shame as very different things. Guilt is the action. If I come over here and steal your purse, I did an action. And I might feel guilt for taking something that wasn't mine. But if I say, I'm an evil person for stealing things like that, or in the case here of our little girl, if mama says, taking that cookie is bad, she has now made the action of taking a cookie bad. But if she says, you're a bad girl for taking the cookie, she has now made it about the person. She has said, you are a bad person, the kind that does those sort of actions. So that's shame. Shame is about a state of being. Is that clear about those two concepts, how they're different? Okay, because we're going to use that. We're going to use that in therapy to help heal moral injury, but we need to know how it starts. The action is guilt. When I do that action enough or in a bad way, or someone says I'm bad for it, it becomes shame. I look in the mirror, I feel like an awful person. That's shame. So again, at the COVID-19 story, when we interviewed people and did questionnaires, we asked them what they felt guilty about as healthcare providers. Mostly these were nurses, but it was others as well. And they said, I should be writing grants or articles with my extra free time, but I feel guilty because I don't have any. I feel guilt for being distracted. Work and parenting are both suffering. I feel guilty admitting that I'm actually not struggling as much as the next person. I feel unable to help my colleagues. I just feel helpless. And I have guilt for not doing enough, and then I have guilt for not taking time off. I just feel guilty about nothing specific. I feel selfish for having fun. I should be on the front line. So I imagine these ideas about guilt, these statements, might resonate with some of you and what you felt in the last couple of years here too. So let's talk about the components of guilt. We're going to break this down step by step. When we have guilt, there's a trigger, and it's going to induce a thought or feeling. Something's going to happen, and we react in some way. That guilt applies a pressure for us to do something. Like I take the cookie, mom says, don't take that cookie. I have a pressure to correct my action. And if I do it properly, it can lead to resolution. If I don't, and it's very individual, but if I don't do it, the guilt persists. So what can we do to alleviate guilt? So when there's this trigger that leads to a feeling, whatever it is you're feeling guilty about, you can fill in the blank. We can feel stressed out, anxiety, sleeplessness, bad dreams, feel like our heart is heavy, anger, numbness, feel like I don't care about anything anymore. All kind of components of burnout as well. But that guilt then kind of says, I need something to balance it out. So if I do this act, pay this penance, I will correct it. I will erase it or cancel it out. So something could be we contribute or we donate. We undo. We can think of that psychologically as well. We can make amends. We can do restitution. We can talk it over with somebody and say, I hurt you and I'm sorry about it. We can isolate. We can just get away from it. We can feel anger, resentment. And we can decide what we're going to do. Sometimes just the decision to do it is helpful. We can decide to do something, and we can decide we're not going to do anything at all about this. We're just going to let it go. And awareness enables choice. So the reason I'm going through this step by step is because when these situations happen to you or to your patients, I want you to be able to think about these components. Let's pick this apart a little bit, because what we're going to do is this neat little thing. So Viktor Frankl is the gentleman in this picture, again, the concentration camp survivor from Nazi Germany. And in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, sorry, it took me a second, he wrote, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. I think this is a really important statement, because so many times between stimulus and response, there is no space. I think of it as only a potential space. Maybe we can create the space. But we are on autopilot, one thing to the other rapidly. When you work on any behavioral change with your patients, you're going to be looking for those two pieces, the stimulus and the response. And what you want to do is bring this up to consciousness. Because if you can get them to pay attention to this, or if we can pay attention to it in ourselves, we can say, oh, this thing led to this feeling, this response that I'm making. And once we do that, we actually get to open up that space that gives us a second or two that we could, for just a moment, envision a different ending. This trigger happened, this response is about to happen, but maybe I could do something else. That's really, really critical. In that maybe I could do something else allows us to envision a different ending, which allows us to actually move toward the different ending. So this is choice. So when I work with people, I say a lot of times we're on autopilot. So let's make the unconscious conscious. Let's start to identify those places where this happens so that you have the opportunity to choose your response. So we slow this down and we look at it carefully, and this is how we work with this. You have to be able to have that moment to envision a different future, to be able to get out of autopilot and head a different direction. Another part of guilt is you have to decide if you're the owner of the guilt. Does this guilt actually belong to me? Was it really in my control? I want to go back a couple slides. I'll let you take your picture. Oops. You want a picture? Okay. And I'm going to go back quickly to this one. I should be writing grants or articles with extra free time, but I feel guilty because I don't have any. When I read that, I wondered if that person that didn't have any time, if that was their own doing. If they felt guilty that they didn't have time, but it wasn't their decision that they didn't have time. It was that their boss said you have to work extra. You know, it's COVID-19. You have to do 15 hours a day every day, 18 hours a day, 24. So this person had guilt over something that they had no control over, possibly. So I would say that isn't your guilt to have. You can be unhappy that you don't have the time, but that isn't your guilt. You don't have to own that one. So if the guilt is truly yours, if it's something you could do something about, had some decisional control, then what are your solutions to resolve it? Let's lay out a few things. But if the answer is no, it wasn't in your control, what can I choose to do instead? I mean, the first thing is, I guess I just shouldn't feel guilty about that thing that I really couldn't control. I can't control if there's a car wreck in front of me and I'm driving home and now I'm late and I can't fix dinner. I can't feel guilty about that because that wasn't mine to feel guilty about. Okay? This takes a little practice. This takes spotting it, finding it, and then going, was that mine or not? We are in the habit of feeling guilty a lot of times. And I think especially women with multiple roles, with mothers and kids, we're always the caretaker, and there's always something, parents and children and work, that we can feel guilty about. But I think we really have to think about if that's our guilt to even have in the first place. Does anybody think that idea might work for them if they tried it? Yeah? So I think this is actually the primary task of psychiatry. The whole point of making the unconscious conscious is to allow the space to see the alternate ending, to enable change, to envision and enable change. If people didn't change, I don't think I'd be doing this job because it would be too depressing. This is a hard job enough, but I feel rewarded when I see people get better. But that's because change is possible, but we need to piece these bits apart sometimes. We can expand that space for ourselves and our patients and allow choice for a different ending. So back to Viktor Frankl. He said, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. I think this is really powerful considering he was in the concentration camp. He said every morning where they had no freedom, he would walk out in the yard and he would choose one blade of grass to pick and to eat. It was the one thing he had control over. And he said, they can't make me feel bad about that. I have one thing. And my attitude. So he found a way to maintain some control. And he found a way to separate the actions of others from his attitude in that moment. Another one of his sayings was, we must expand into the space we are in. That's sort of unhinged from past, And from future, that's the now. I heard a great thing the other day that I really liked. It said, regret can only live in the past, and anxiety can truly only live in the future. We can choose to stay now. It is what it is. Tomorrow will be tomorrow. But we can choose our attitude in today and expand into this space that we feel now. So that leads me to the concept of post-traumatic growth. After seeing the darkness, I appreciate the light in a new way. As horrible as the last couple of years have been here, has anybody experienced anything positive from this? I know we've made friends from Warsaw. We have relationships that we wouldn't have had otherwise. I'm here. Wouldn't have otherwise been here had not been for the war. But are there things in your life, connections, or friends, or some experience, or even your own, like, boy, I didn't know I could do that. And you've risen to the challenge of what you've had to do. So that's post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth can only grow after a trauma, by definition. It is not something we ask for. It isn't fair, usually. It isn't something we've chosen. But it is a chance to write a new ending. It is a chance to change your trajectory. And it is a chance to grow beyond past perspectives and limits because you've seen something different. Even if what was different was bad, it still gives you a broader range of experience to draw from. And maybe the good is even better now. It's even sweeter. And we, by our very nature, are meaning-making machines. We take what goes on around us and we turn it into some substance of meaning. And that's called cognitive restructuring. We can use that as a tool. We're going to talk about that in the next hour. When we phrase this as post-traumatic growth, as we're not stopping at PTSD, we're going to start talking about PTG, post-traumatic growth. We can see reductions in depression and anxiety and PTSD symptoms. There's lots of literature on this. I didn't put all the references in. But there's a pretty broadly expanding body of evidence about post-traumatic growth. So part of when we talk to our patients, they say, I don't want to forget what happened. I don't want to forget my friend. This may be a reason they don't want to try medications or don't want to do therapy. I'm afraid I will forget them. If I forget them, it won't honor them anymore. Very common with our military. And I like to say, I don't have like a mind erase thing where I just come up and zap you and your memory's gone. You're going to remember. But maybe we can see it through the eyes of a 35-year-old instead of the 28-year-old you were then. Maybe we can apply new meaning and context to that. That recovery does not equal forgetting. I don't want you to forget. I want you to hold the honor for them. And I want you to honor the core meaning and the spirit of the love you had for your friend or whatever the situation was. And it may be in a different way than you did before. You don't have to do it on Veterans Day or National Day. You can do it in your own way, in a private way too. A lot of our vets are afraid to go out on America's big holiday, 4th of July. Independence Day. Fireworks, loud noises. It's too stimulating. Or Memorial Day, where we remember our veterans. And they say, I feel bad because I just can't get out then. And I say, you don't have to. You find your way to hold honor in your own time. You get to write the book. You get to write the rules. Part of this is in giving yourself permission to have joy and to live on. We're going to talk a little about that in the 3-chair technique. You can celebrate and honor in your own way, in your own time. This is my daughter and myself as we went to the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C. I was stationed in Korea for a year, so this was pretty meaningful to me. But teaching my little girl about the sacrifices that our soldiers have made. So it's another way to hold honor. Make sense? Questions about this? So I think it's a good thing to say to our patients that it doesn't end with PTSD. There's something that comes after it. And the thing that comes after it is post-traumatic growth. And just being here starting has already put you on that path. I happen to think this picture looked like the Ukrainian flag. Seemed fitting. So let's talk about the 10 keys to resiliency. So in the study that my mentor, Dr. Southwick, did, they looked at lots of people who were highly resilient. Navy SEALs, Special Forces, soldiers, special operations teams, but also ordinary people who were in extraordinary circumstances. Places where there were tsunamis or major catastrophes. And some people handled it really, really well. And they said, what is it about these folks? Is there a way that we could kind of choose people like that into our military that were highly resilient? Or is there some way we can kind of train people to maximize their resiliency by learning from people that are naturally? And they came up with 10 keys. They said, these are the common things among these people. And they seem kind of simple when we talk about it. When we put it together as a whole, you can see why this might make a lot of sense. So one was just to maintain an optimistic but realistic outlook. I'm not going to fool myself about how bad it is, but I am going to realize that we can get through it. Just that attitude alone. And the ability to confront one's fears. So this means I'm actually going to face it in a realistic way and not avoid or hide or deny or go behind all those psychological mechanisms. And another is to rely on one's own inner moral compass. It may be that society is saying we have to do it this way, but if I know it's wrong, I need to be true to myself. Okay, we think about Nazi Germany, and there were people that stood up and said, this isn't right? Or you think about the race wars in the United States and the Underground Railroad, which is helping slaves escape. Some people stood up and said, I'm going to follow my moral compass because right is right, regardless of what the law says. Using religious or spiritual practices if you have them, right? If that makes sense for you, if you have a faith, following your faith and keeping in alignment with that. This is really hard. Not the providing part, but the accepting social support is really hard. My fiance 20 years ago was a Green Beret, Special Forces in the U.S. Army, and he died in a plane crash. And the community came together to help me. And boy, I didn't really want the help. I wanted to take care of everything myself, but I needed the help, frankly. And they were kind and generous, and it's almost humiliating in a way to have to accept help, because it means you have to face your own limitations. But eventually I did, and got through it, moved on with my world. And part of me goes, I'm never going to be able to pay those people back ever. And that wasn't the point. They didn't want it. But when opportunity arises for me to help someone else, I say, I have that little debt that I owe somebody for all that help. Let me help someone else instead. So that's been my thinking about it because of that tragedy. But accepting help is hard. Providing it isn't so hard for us. We're pretty good providers. Learn from and imitate resilient role models. Find people you think are doing it well and see what they're doing and do it like that. That can help. Keeping track of yourself physically, trying to get some exercise, walking, things that keep your own physical body intact. And doing things to stay mentally sharp, trying to get enough sleep, nutrition, hydration, those things that will keep you going. And accept what cannot change. That sounds simple, but this is actually where we get stuck in psychotherapy a lot, is the undoing. We want to go back and undo the broken thing from before, and we can't do it, so we repeat it. We may repeat it in relationship after relationship after relationship. From the amputation literature, there is a phrase called radical acceptance. And radical acceptance is defined as giving up all hope of a better past. It seems silly because how can we hope for a better past? It's already past. But truly that's what the mind does and recreates over and over in this pattern. So accepting what can't be changed is healthy. And it is resilient. And look for meaning and opportunity in adversity. So this is the growth part, right? So these were the common factors in people who were naturally resilient. And I think you can probably feel that some of those already apply to you because I'm sure some of you have already done them. But knowing about this can help you be attuned to the other things. So I would just say I'd like to pass on that advice from my mentor, kind of in his name and in his honor, so that you know this too, because I think it'll help. This is what I do. I play a little Irish fiddle, apparently for cows. And I write things that sound like old Irish fiddle tunes, but there's stories about PTSD. There's stories about my patients, kind of a conglomeration of patients. I write about the nightmares, and I write about the loss, and then I play it on my fiddle in the Irish pub. So this is a way that I process and vent out this diet of trauma that I receive from my patients. This is how I metabolize. And also, when I play the fiddle, I have to pay attention to 6 things at once. And if my mind wanders at all, I mess it up. So it forces me to concentrate and clear my mind and focus cleanly on one thing. So often after work, I'll play my fiddle for a half hour just to get the day out. So little things like that. So strategies for things that you as individuals can do. Avoidance and isolation. We want to try to check in with each other. You might want to have a battle buddy. You might want to have a colleague or friend that you check in with each other. How is your week going? I had a rough case the other day. It's kind of lingering. How are you sleeping? You want to sit down after work and make sure we're doing okay here? You can check in on each other, follow up. You are resilient already. So figure out ways to keep that basketball inflated if you're feeling like it's going down a little. Eat, sleep, self-care, medical appointments, exercise. Permission to put on your oxygen mask first before you take care of anyone else. You can't take care of them if you're not in good shape. Find your personal mission. Hobbies, church, service, helping others. I do this. Daily choices in alignment with your moral true north on your moral compass. Where are your values? Where do they point? Go toward your values. They're all unique. And lean on your team because this is a room full of wisdom. If you don't know it, I bet one of the people in this room does. So trust your team. All right? That's kind of for the individual, though. Putting on your oxygen mask, the effect can ripple outward. What can the organization do? Those of you who are managers or heads of your department or administration, protect and support your staff. Give them permission for self-care. Monitor for burnout and moral injury separately. Accurately communicate risk. If they're in danger, let them know. If there's trouble, let them know it's coming. And let's figure out ways to mitigate or reduce risk to keep everyone safe. Because that's trust, right? Your team, your workers can't trust you if they don't think you're taking care of them and watching out for them. Develop a culture of psychological safety if errors are made. Are errors punished or are errors examined and used as tools to reduce that in the future? Try to give people feedback, good feedback about what they do. Learn from mistakes and stay solution-oriented. Don't focus on blame, focus on where we're going with this and why we're doing it. It's hard to do if we're tired and scared. We try to blame each other, but let's focus on the solution. And have leadership that encourages critical thinking and adaptation. The best solution for something may come from the guy that's sweeping the room. He may be the one to see the thing that needs to be changed. So ideas can come from anywhere. Be ready to adapt. And lead by example. Take care of yourself as leaders and advocate for your team. Be their strongest proponent. Goals. I like this acronym. It's in English. I don't think the letters work in Ukrainian, but we're going to do it anyway. But when you have goals, I think it's important to break this down too. Have your goals be specific, measurable, attainable, something that you can really do, relevant. I think sometimes our bosses send us on tasks that have nothing to do with what we really need. And time-based. When are we going to get back with the answer? So I think when you have goals like this, it makes sense and communication stays good. Feedback stays good. So in summary, keep your football or basketball inflated to be able to bounce back from stressors. Take care of yourself. Guard yourself and your team from sources of burnout and moral injury when possible. Be watchful and protect against guilt and shame and isolation. And work on making the unconscious conscious. It leads to change and post-traumatic growth. Use that language with your patients. Let them know there's something beyond PTSD. And recognize and use individual and organizational keys to resiliency. I think those things can help keep the strength up. So, with that, I would like to, can we take just a couple minutes and talk about ideas that may work for your teams?
Yes.
So, this is kind of the free part where anyone can speak about anything you think might be helpful for your group, or anything you think maybe we can't do it, how would you suggest a different way? Anything that's come up in your mind while we were talking here. You can also say things that are being done right.
Коли ми обговорювали цю новину, ми
спав на духу, щоб робили це такий специфічний договір, який ми укладаємо з нашої угоди чи без. І або ми усвідомлюємо це, або ми можемо і не усвідомлювати. І саме зробити з несвідомого свідоме – це ще раз мені нагадало про важливість. Пам'ятайте про це. Дякую.
You're welcome. It reminds me a little bit of pain. Right? Pain is a signal that tells our body that something's wrong. And pain should be accurate. But think of phantom pain. You're getting a pain from something that isn't there. And guilt can be like that. Guilt can be accurate. We could have done something that we should feel bad about and we should make amends for. That's corrective. But we could feel guilt about something else, like that phantom limb. And sometimes we have to say that's not ours. So bringing it to the consciousness helps delineate what truly is and what truly isn't, instead of what we call emotional reasoning. I feel guilty, therefore I must be guilty about something. It's backwards. So normally there's a thing that I feel guilty about. But in emotional reasoning, we feel the emotion first. I feel guilty. Therefore, I'm going to find a reason to say, oh, I must be guilty about this thing. Maybe it's not true. You know, I feel angry. Therefore, I must be angry about something. Maybe I'm not. Maybe there wasn't really a trigger, but I'm dealing with some internal feelings. You know, there are lots of different ways that can play out. Other comments? Thank you.
Тут тяжко говорити про себе, але я прошу вас, дозвольте собі. Це важкість допомагати собі. Будь ласка, що в голову приходить? Воно ж там обов'язково щось має бути.
Я хочу відрефлексувати стосовно тої картинки, де ви йдете повз меморіал пам'яті, тому що я теж живу біля меморіалу, і я дуже часто чую, як ховають хлопців. І моя дитина мене запитує: мама, чого ти плачеш? І я кажу, бо мені дуже сумно, і ми повинні якось це проживати, тому я плачу. І вона говорить про те, що але ж ми не винні в тому, що вони помирають. Тобто і дуже складно пояснити, чого ми живемо в той час, чому гинуть люди і чому ми не можемо це зупинити. І в такі моменти почуваємо себе дуже безпорадними. Чи запитували вас про таке? І як на це правильно відповісти?
Absolutely. You're talking about survivor guilt. There's a lot of information out there about survivor guilt. So it's very hard to be the one left when you see someone else fall and die. I think that's one of the hardest tasks we have as human beings, is to continue living when those we care about are not. The mind wants to make sense of this in a way and attribute, why was I safe when they weren't? What did I do differently? What did they do wrong? And sometimes it isn't. We don't sit well with random. We don't sit well with chance. Random and chance are scary as hell. Because we are meaning-making machines that associate cause and effect, we want to say that we are safe and they were hurt because of something that they did or something that I did right. But the truth is, it could have been any of us. And that's frightening. So the mind makes sense of it. I think it's lovely that you tell your child that it's because I'm sad. You're modeling and identifying a true and real emotion. And they said it's not your fault because in his thinking, the child sees sadness as because I did something. So they're associating it as an act, a response to an act. So it's a difficult situation for our children to witness this. And, you have your expression of emotion. You can just do what's true. I'm sorry you're going through that.
Для вашої дитини.
Мене цікавить таке питання, як професійна деформація. Кожна людина собі може щось простити, може щось не простити. Певні дії мають певні наслідки. І коли людина багато працює, наприклад, в професійному напрямку, вони вже стають не такі чутливі до проблем пацієнтів. Чи є та межа в цій роботі, чи немає? Бо якщо ми все собі будемо прощати, можливо, ми щось не зробили. Можливо, щось ми могли більше зробити, але ми цього не зробили. Чи це є вже деформація, чи це є просто ми собі можемо пояснити якось по-іншому? Так. Ми можемо себе виправдати в чомусь, можемо себе виправдати, може не виправдати, можемо чогось не зробити, могли щось, можливо, більше зробити, але ми себе можемо виправдати все рівно. Чи це не можна вважати як професійну деформацію? Бо ми стаємо чувствіші до цього.
If I'm understanding correctly, you're saying some of the guilt should be ours, that we should hold this and pay the cost. I think we do, actually. I think you can forgive, but it doesn't erase. Forgiveness is to let go of the constant sting, but we can still have regret for that action. It's subtle, but I think they're a little different. At first I thought you were talking about compassion fatigue. When we are doing a lot of work and we are just, it's hard to care. But I think you're more talking about, should we absolve ourselves of our truly bad actions, if they are. I think we pay the consequence regardless. And you will still hold it. I will hold it. I have mistakes. But it's a question of just continuing to whip myself over the past mistake help in what I can do now for others moving forward? Is that aligned with what the values are moving forward? Can I do more good by letting go of hurting myself in guilt? These are individual questions. But it sounds like the cost has been paid one way or another. Some people truly do bad things. There are people, I've worked with patients who have molested children. I've worked with patients who have murdered. I don't tell them it's okay. It isn't okay. It was a terrible, terrible thing. But my interest is in the patient finding a way to reconcile themselves, to be able to live and move in a better path forward. It's hard. It's hard to do that. And it's going to be hard in the reconstruction if you end up working with any of the enemy's soldiers. That's something we all individually need to come to terms with how we manage that. But there isn't one of us who's going to get out of this lake without regrets. We have them. But we don't have to destroy ourselves over them. We are allowed peace. Does that, do you want to add anything to that?
It's the second time I'm very confused after your lecture. Actually, about the last comment. Well, today after your comment, as a doctor, a human being, I do understand that we have to provide the medical help to the enemy soldier. But as Ukrainian, I don't think that it is our responsibility to provide them the psychological help. Can you please clarify your comments and your understanding of this?
Sorry, I've been in 2 languages all week too. I think it would be extremely difficult to provide mental health care to the enemy. It is like a conflict of interest, right? This is a bridge to cross. I don't know what will happen, and I don't know what policies will be in place. I think the truth is it is individual as to how we respond, what harms have been done to us, and where we stand in not necessarily forgiving, because this is a very difficult thing, but being able to say, in order to save myself, I will not harm you. But that is hard, right? And I don't know that psychological help is going to be something that would be easy or possible. It might be that needs to be deferred to an outside group or to a Russian group or something else. I don't have an answer for that. But it's an important question. I think the most important thing is that you're aware of your feelings and conflict about that. How you can act as a doctor and how you can't act as a therapist. Because that's the delineation I'm hearing you're making. And that's your individual one. I'm not going to judge that. That's your decision, and I will support whatever decisions people come to in their own hearts and minds about this. Policy is yet to be seen, but psychologically, incredibly difficult.
Ще маємо 3 хвилини, якщо хочете якісь питання. Я хочу ще глибше зануритися. Собі так думаю, треба, не треба, але почуття вини, особливо почуття вини через те, що я вижив, чи ми вижили, чи хтось вижив, воно є важким. Так? Ми, очевидно, багато про це розуміємо, знаємо. Але як психологи, психіатри, психотерапевти, психоаналітики, ми маємо трошки глибше подивитися в цей процес. Що лежить глибоко під тою почуттям, неймовірним почуттям вини? Яке почуття там ховається від свідомості? Так? І яке? Чому ця вина така болюча?
Радість того, що вижив.
Радість. От в чому суть. Інстинкт самозбереження ніхто не відміняв. І оця радість того, що... Я, до речі, це пізнав через військових. які в терапії довші, де довіри більше. І вони розповідають про цю моментальну радість, яка є очевидною і зрозумілою, але вона не може бути пояснена в соціальному аспекті, коли втрата навколо є найдорожчих людей. Ця радість є out of place. Вона є неприйнятна культурально. Хоча наші предки далекі, доісторичні, танцювали на похоронах. Я не знаю, чи ви коли-небудь читали ці древньослов'янські описи ритуалів похорону. На похоронах танцювали і бавилися з сексуальних ігрищ, святкуючи життя, яке вони мають жити. Це, до речі, також я привіз, коли навчався в Америці, взяв собі курс український фольклор і слов'янська філософія. І, власне, нас цього не вчили тут. Тому це є складні речі, які в тому числі і культурально мають дбати. Людство подбало про виживання і про інстинкти, і про культуральні процеси. Тому я так собі думаю, наша тактика виживання і боротьби з вигоранням чи з вторинною травмою, яка є сучасними термінологічними феноменами, вона має також трошечки нагадувати і загнилюватися в нашу культуру. Не випадково в нас стоїть ткацький верстат, на якому хлопці, які мають контузії, дуже швидко піднімаються. Може, це їм і наші рухи, рух допомагають, а може і допомагають якісь певні архаїчні символи і дотики. Тому, підсумовуючи це все, що ми сьогодні говорили про нашу з вами резильєнтність, я думаю, що ми мусимо думати про сучасні речі, супервізії, інтервізії, ретріти, це модні слова, не наші, Але разом з тим мусимо і трошки зануритися в глибину переживань нашої культури. Ворог не випадково знищує культуру першою. У формі релігії, всі церкви познищували у формі знищення музеїв, картинних галерей, бібліотек, вбивали людей, які зберігали етнографічні, письменників, кобзарів, завезли і розбомбили їх, розстріляли в одному ярі. Тому що це резильєнтність. І це зараз зовсім для мене внутрішньо не є якісь пафосні теоретичні речі. Це те, що нас зробить сильним. І заставить нас тішитися життю заради того, щоб не вбивали інших. Thank you very much.
I want to say one little quote from one small quote from my daughter when she was 5. She said, "Mad is better than sad. Mad can have a little piece of happy in it. But sad doesn't even have a little piece of happy in it. It just has lots of pieces of bad." So that joy can be in survival, the joy can be in victory, and the joy can be in seeing someone you hate suffer. But the most important thing is to be aware of yourself. I know this was a rough lecture. Go refresh yourselves, and we'll come back and do a little bit more.
Ми маємо 10 хвилин. Іди назад.